What if almost everything you do each day is secretly about not dying? You probably don't think about death very often. Not really. You might joke about it, scroll past the news, watch stories where people disappear and the world moves on, but then you go back to your messages, your to-do list, your next plan. Life feels too full, too immediate, to stop and stare into that dark question for long. And yet, somewhere underneath all the noise, you know how this ends. One day, your heart will beat for the last time. The people you love will be gone. Everything you're building will pass to someone else or vanish completely. Most of us carry this awareness like a quiet background hum, always there, rarely acknowledged. We're the only creatures who can imagine our own disappearance in vivid detail. That awareness is not neutral. It scares us. If you truly felt the full weight of your own mortality in every moment, it might be so. Without even deciding to, you develop a strategy. You push it away. You distract yourself. You tell yourself, not now. I'll deal with that later. Later becomes never. Think about how your day is structured. You keep yourself busy with work, with entertainment, with arguments, with goals stacked on goals. You chase recognition, success, experiences, love, status, comfort. All of those are natural human desires. But look closer. How many of them are really attempts to say, I matter, I'm special. My life isn't just a random flicker that disappears without a trace. On the surface, you might be chasing a promotion, a perfect body, a creative achievement, a stable family, a big following. Underneath, something deeper is begging. Please, let this mean I was here. When you feel ignored, disrespected, or invisible, the pain cuts so sharply because it brushes against that terror. What if, in the end, I don't count at all? Most people never connect these dots. They think their anxiety is only about money, or relationships, or not being good enough. But what if those worries are branches, and the root is the knowledge that everything and everyone you care about is fragile and temporary, including you? Because that truth is so heavy, the mind does something clever. It builds shields. You tell yourself stories that make you feel bigger than your body, more permanent than a passing animal. Maybe you imagine being remembered for your achievements. Maybe you identify so strongly with a group, an ideology, a mission, that you feel part of something that stretches beyond your individual lifespan. Maybe you convince yourself that if you do everything right, if you're successful, loved, admired, then somehow you won't truly die in the same way as everyone else. We rarely say this out loud, but it's there. It's why people cling so fiercely to their identities. It's why criticism can feel like an attack on your very existence. It's why you can feel an irrational rush of rage when someone threatens your big project, your belief system, your sense of self. They're not just messing with your preferences. They're poking at the story that protects you from the fear of being nothing. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable people get when conversations drift toward death, aging, or the fragility of life? The jokes come out, the subject changes, the energy tightens. Or, on the other side, we turn it into spectacle action seen as horror, dramatic headlines so we can stare at it safely, like it's far away. In both reactions, we're doing the same thing, trying to keep real mortality at arm's length. But there's a hidden cost to this avoidance. When you spend your life running from the thought of death, you also run from the clarity it brings. If you never seriously face the fact that your time is limited, it's easy to waste your days on things that don't matter. To postpone the conversations you need to have, to stay small in situations where you should be honest and brave. The fear doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It leaks out sideways into obsession with status, into controlling behavior, into resentment, into anxiety that never seems to have a clear source. You might think you're just stressed about work, but beneath that stress is the unspoken belief: if I fail here, I'm insignificant. And if I'm insignificant, why was I even alive? There's another way to respond to this terror, and it's much harder at first. To actually look at it, to sit with a thought, I will die, and see what follows. If you don't immediately run, this isn't about becoming morbid or gloomy. It's about finally acknowledging the background music that has been shaping your choices from the beginning. When you stop pretending that you're the exception to impermanence, something paradoxical can happen. Instead of collapsing into despair, you may feel a strange lightness. The pressure to be perfect starts to crack. because perfect people die too. The obsession with what strangers think begins to look absurd, because their lives are just as brief as yours. You can start asking a different question. Given that this will end, how do I want to live while I'm here? That question doesn't erase fear, but it transforms it. Fear stops being a fog you wander in and becomes a signal. This matters to me. I care how I spend this limited time. It invites responsibility instead of paralysis, and from that place, your projects, your relationships, your ambitions can shift from desperate attempts to escape death into honest expressions of who you are, right now, on this tiny, finite stage. This is just the first step, uncovering how deeply your fear of death shapes your inner life. But once you see that, a new challenge appears. What do you do with this fear? How does it twist your search for meaning and your idea of being a hero in your own story? Because once you uncover the fear, you begin to recognize the patterns it creates everywhere. And some of those patterns are far darker than we like to admit. The second key idea is this. To escape the terror of disappearing, we build grand stories about ourselves. Secretly, almost everyone wants to be the main character of a tale that never really ends. You might dream of your work outliving you, your name being spoken with admiration, your ideas shifting the future, your family line continuing your influence. On the surface, these are dreams of success, but underneath, they're attempts to rewrite the basic rule that everything passes. These immortality quests take many forms. Some people pour themselves into careers, chasing titles and achievements, hoping their legacy will shield them from insignificance. Others cling to groups, causes, or identities that promise, if you belong here, you'll be part of something eternal. Others chase fame, desperately needing their face and name to spread as far as possible, as if recognition itself could defeat the grave. There's nothing wrong with wanting to contribute, to build, to love, to create. The problem is when your entire sense of worth rests on these projects, then any threat to them feels like a life or death attack. Arrival at work becomes not just competition, but an enemy of your existence. Someone who questions your beliefs feels unbearable, because if they're right, your protective story might be wrong, and with it, your shield against mortality. That's how fear of death can lead to everyday cruelty. We sacrifice honesty for image. We sacrifice relationships for status. In extreme cases, people are willing to harm, exclude, or even destroy others in the name of their chosen bigger story, convinced that they're defending something sacred, when in fact they're just defending their own terror of non-existence. The third key idea is that our minds are constantly balancing two truths. We are small, vulnerable creatures, and yet we crave significance. If you only feel your smallness, life can look pointless and bleak. If you only feel your imagined greatness, you can become arrogant, detached from reality, even dangerous. Mental health lives somewhere in the tension between those poles. A relatively stable person is not someone who has eliminated fear of death. That's impossible. Instead, they've learned to acknowledge it without being consumed by it. They accept that they will never be perfectly safe, perfectly admired, perfectly remembered, and they stop demanding that life give them those guarantees. They still build, love, dream, and strive, but with a bit more humility and humor. They know they are one finite being among billions, and somehow that knowledge makes their choices more, not less, meaningful. The fourth key idea is that denying death completely doesn't free you. It traps you. When you refuse to think about your end, you become easy to manipulate. Any promise that whispers you'll be different, you'll last, you'll be special forever, can hook you. You might throw your life energy into hollow symbols of success, never questioning whether they reflect what you truly value. Facing mortality honestly, on the other hand, can be strangely liberating. When you really grasp that your time is limited, certain things lose their power over you. Petty status games, endless comparison, the fear of looking foolish in front of people who won tea, remember you in a few years anyway. You begin to choose differently. You prioritize depth over display, relationships over reputation, truth over comfort. The final key is this. Integrating death into your awareness is not about obsession. It's about orientation. You don't need to think about it every second. You don't need to revel in darkness. You simply need to let the fact of your finiteness quietly shape your decisions. Instead of asking, how can I avoid thinking about the end? You start asking, given that there is an end, what is worth doing? Practical questions emerge from that shift. If today were one of the last 100 days of your life, would you still be spending your energy the same way? Which conflicts suddenly seem too small to carry? Which conversations become urgent? What creative risks feel less scary when you realize the real risk is dying without ever having tried? Living with mortality in mind doesn't mean giving up ambition, it means transforming it. You can still build things, pursue excellence, leave a mark, but you become less obsessed with being remembered forever and more concerned with being honest. Now, you care less about your name lasting and more about your impact being real for the people who are actually here, actually breathing beside you. When you stop hiding from death, you finally start living. You also become more compassionate. When you remember that everyone around you is also heading toward an unknown end, their flaws look different. That difficult colleague, that angry stranger, that person who disappointed you behind their behavior is the same fragile awareness that one day they, too, will be gone. This doesn't excuse harm, but it can soften the hard edge of judgment. So how do you start integrating this in daily life without becoming overwhelmed? You can begin with simple, grounded practices. Once in a while, pause and picture your own life from far above, as if you were watching time-lapse from birth to death. Ask, what kind of person is walking through this storyline? What patterns keep repeating? This isn't about shaming yourself. It's about seeing clearly. You can reflect regularly on questions like, if I knew my time was short, what would I stop postponing? Who should I apologize to? Who should I thank? What work would feel meaningful, even if nobody ever praised me for it? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are the ones that cut through the distractions. You can also reshape your personal story of significance. Instead of trying to become a flawless legend, you can aim to be a flawed, honest human who used their brief window of consciousness to reduce suffering and increase understanding even in small ways. Legacy stops being about statues and becomes about the invisible ripples of your actions in the lives you touch. Legacy is not living forever. It's living honestly while you're here. Death is not a topic we like, but it's the one topic that quietly sits behind all the others. You don't have to worship it, fear it constantly, or pretend to be at peace with it. You just have to stop pretending it isn't there. Once you do that, your priorities shift. Your days gain weight. The excuses you've told yourself for years sound thinner. If this exploration stirred something in you, if part of you feels afraid, and another part relieved, that's a sign you're touching something real. Don't numb it immediately with another distraction. Sit with it a little longer. Then choose one tiny action that honors the fact that your life and the lives around you are finite and precious. A message you've postponed. A risk you've delayed. A habit you know is wasting your only non-renewable resource. Time. If you want more videos that don't just help you pass the time, but help you see time differently, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Winds of Thought. That small action tells the platform to show these ideas to more people who are quietly carrying the same fear you are. You can't outrun death, but you can stop letting the fear of it secretly run you. And in that shift, your life can become not longer, but deeper.